Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Derek Liuzzo here today with Dr. Melissa Yeung. Dr. Yeung, thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure.
I read your recent editorial in JoPTE, Access, Opportunity, and Transparency in Academic Publishing, and it resonates deeply with many of the conversations we're having in physical therapy education right now. Before we dive into the article, though, I'd love to start with your journey. I know that you're currently at Bowling Green. I can't even talk today. Bowling Green State University. Um, could you tell us a little bit about your clinical and academic background and what really drew you to apply to be JoPTE's very first editorial fellow?
Thank you for having me. First off, well, my fun fact that I always share with people in the PT education world is I am not a PT, which surprises a lot of people. My background is I've just completely been in higher education, specifically in admissions, in the graduate space, and a lot of my research work, and service work really is in diversity and equity around grad admissions. So holistic, admissions, all that, that's kind of my jam. And I fell into PT education by chance. I moved to a new city with my husband and got a job at Virginia Commonwealth University's DPT program as an admissions coordinator. And during that time there, I was really fortunate. My boss, Dr. Emma Wheeler, she was the DCE and the director of admissions. She's retired now. I know I text her all the time. I was like, I don't know how you do this. But she
Exactly.
did.
That's absolutely crazy. That's
It
a
is
heck of a load.
crazy. Yeah. But she was so gracious. She's such a good mentor from day one. She kind of took me under her wing. And I think it probably was like my first month on the job. She looked at me and she said, VCU pays for your education. Go get your PhD. You are going to do great things. And, that's such a nice feeling, right? For someone who really barely knows you to have that belief in you. And so I took that to heart. I enrolled in the PhD program at our institution as a part-time student, right? Because I had to keep the tuition benefit. And during that time and she allowed me a lot of room to grow in PT education. I learned so much. She was like, you should do something with admissions in PT education. And so my dissertation was a focus on just diversity in the admissions process and the experiences of racially minoritized students. But, I graduated in 2020. And after I
That's a heck of a
graduated,
year to graduate to.
it was, and there's so much going on. I was in between jobs. It was a lot, but I did my dissertation. I was told by my chair that, hey, you could get like 3 or 4 articles out of this. I was like, great. I mean, that sounded amazing, but you're a part-time student. The social aspect of being a doctoral student isn't quite there, right? Because you're balancing all of these other things in life. And, my dissertation chair, she's amazing, but she also had other things going on. And so, once I graduated, that was kind of the end of it. And I really had to figure out, how to publish and do all of these things on my own. And it took a lot of work. I was fortunate enough that the one and only manuscript from my dissertation was published in JoPTE. And looking back now, I really appreciate the reviewer's patience because I really didn't know what I was doing, right? And so when I came across, the opportunity to be an editorial fellow, I felt like that was the universe kind of aligned, the stars aligned, right? That was my opportunity to pass on some of the lessons I learned, hopefully some wisdom in a way that, allows other people to not have to go through what I went through.
Right. I
That
mean,
was the whole.
absolutely. I think you
Yeah.
bring up a huge point in that it sounds like a really great opportunity,
Hmm.
given your background with the part-time doctoral work as well.
Yeah.
That had to have been really, really hard, not only from the standpoint of trying to get your work done, but like you said,
Yeah.
mentorship and that idea that you're not getting that constant mentorship all the time. And I think that's something that you said in the article too, is that that gap in mentorship can lead to really a serious gap in knowledge, particularly for
Hmm.
those with marginalized identities. From your own experiences and observations, what are the biggest invisible barriers that part-time doctoral students face when trying to break into academic publishing?
I think it's like not knowing what you don't know. Right, that was such a huge thing. And I've been, prior to being a student myself, I worked in grad education. I know a lot of students who've, been in PhD programs, right? I had friends who were, did their PhD. My husband did his PhD before I did, but they were all full-time students. And when you're a full-time student, there is a bit more structure in your education, right? You have a supervisor, your grad assistant, you teach, my husband's a chemist, so he's in the lab a lot of the times, right? You kind of have some kind of mentoring, right? Whatever that looked like, you have access to a supervisor. The supervisor sometimes publishes with you. So because their name is on it, they want the article to look good. So you get a little more support in that way, right? My husband published like 5 papers before he even graduated. So
Yeah.
he already even he chose not to go down the academia route, as a lot of our friends chose not to, but they had the benefit of that experience as a student. And that was the same experience for my friends who were in the same program as I was, but they were full time, right? So they had their grad assistantships, they had a supervisor, they were publishing. Whereas I, kind of learned that as a part-time student, you don't have that experience. I talked about it earlier, it's that socialization as a doctoral student. There just isn't, right? We are trying to work full time. We're trying to teach and, do all the things. And I don't know, I think for a lot of us PT educators who are trying to get our terminal degree, you're working, you have a family, you're just trying to juggle so many things. As a lot of my colleagues at BGSU, all our experiences are similar. So there isn't a lot of time as a student to explore these opportunities, and you really don't get to do it until you graduated, you're done with, the dissertation, and now you can think about publishing. Um, so yeah, I think it's just not knowing what there is to know about the process.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge point is I went to a structured PhD
Mhm.
program and the same thing that you're talking about is, I did have that kind of guidance and mentorship and her having her name on the paper really helped.
Yeah.
And so it feels like those in the structured program get a bit of a boost versus those in a part-time or post-professional. Thinking about your experiences with that, how do you think the PhD program, especially for those that were part-time or post-professional, how could they structure themselves so that those students aren't left out in this
Yeah.
publishing world?
I don't know. I think it's so hard, right? Because there is the push and there is the pull. And we are educators, we know this. You can offer all the things to students, but sometimes life happens, right?
Yeah.
And you're a part-time student, it's just a really challenging place to be. You're trying to get things done, you have other obligations. So it is hard. And I will say this like to my death, right? Mentoring relationships are so important. And I say this all the time, really good mentoring opportunities are very hard to build because they have to be structured enough to keep people going, but they cannot be too structured, right? That people are like, this is too much. I cannot commit to the time that it takes, right? So I think that is the challenge. But I will, die on this hill. Like I said, mentoring is important. Offering just resources and workshops is also important. At BGSU, just within the DPT program, we have a dedicated director of research and faculty development. So he is like our research guy. And he makes time for us, and he's like, okay, this is, and he encourages us to be very creative with what we're doing. And he'll be like, hey, you're teaching this class, you can use this instrument with the students, right? And then do a study on the outcomes of, whether it's a teaching or learning strategy, something that you're doing to support the students. And our program director is also very supportive of that. And that's a very, it's built in from day one. We knew that was what we were going to offer our faculty. And I wish that more programs could do that, not just PT programs, right? Just across different fields. And we have faculty from other programs who come and say, wow, it's great. You have, this person here as a resource, and I wish my institution had that. But I also know, that's challenging, right? Deal with all kinds of constraints, but mentoring, like, I think it's like such a big thing. That would be
I think that's amazing how intentional your
Mhm.
program was about having that director of research. And I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think it would help, and especially not just students, but from your, like you were saying, that point of junior faculty coming in,
hmm
and this
hmm
is the direction that you can go. And so
Yeah.
I know you wrote really candidly about how publication in general, the process
hmm
can feel really, really daunting and frustrating. I mean, even to not just new researchers, but some that have researched for a while. But it's often misunderstood as just good or bad. And like you said in your editorial, during this fellowship, you got to shadow Dr. Keshri Naidu, the editor in chief, and see how manuscripts move from submission to decision. How did how did seeing the behind the scenes change your perspective or inform your perspective on the whole process?
I would say it's like a shift in perspective, right? And I imagine it as, you're in a room and you're on one side of the wall, and then all of a sudden you shifted and now you're seeing the wall is here and now you see both sides, right? Obviously, I feel very strongly about my experiences as an author, right? Trying to submit, and I, feel like that's a common experience. Like you said, whether you're a seasoned researcher or you're a new researcher, we all feel some kind of way, right? When you get your manuscript back and it's full of, comments, and you have to go take a walk around the block before you sit down or talk to someone, right? That's such a common experience. So obviously, I felt really strongly about that experience, but then seeing the other side, I think it was that first meeting that it just clicked for me. It's also about the responsibility that the journal has to our community, right?
Right.
We cannot, I say we, but the journal cannot be put in a position where we are publishing research that doesn't benefit us as a whole, right? We tell
Right.
our students, right, we focus on evidence-based practice, but what if the evidence is not rigorous enough, right? It's not that it's good or bad, it's just not rigorous enough. So I think the journal has that responsibility to that community. Right. And especially if the profession as a whole, I mean, it elevates the profession of as a whole as well, right? Journal is a representation of the profession of PT education. So I think that was that shift that happened for me that now I'm like, oh, okay. So I think my intention was to come into this fellowship and be like, okay, these are the things that we need to do to be able to help new researchers, but also realizing that this is a balance, right? And we all have this shared responsibility as members of this community to make sure that we kind of have some, hold some standards and hold the journal to some standards, right? And if you are an author of this journal, you want it to be a good journal because, obviously it helps you. So that was the shift in the perspective.
That's such a big point, is that idea of where as authors we're coming at it from this is our, our
hmm
research and we like this and this is exactly what I was trying to say. And then
Yeah.
to get that feedback, it does
Yeah.
kind of feel sometimes of like, oh no, I'm not good.
Yeah.
But to your point is very, very, true, which is it's not about whether or not the article is good or bad. It's about
hmm
is it at a standard that it should be. And I think that
Yeah.
responsibility is huge, like you said. It's hard timing wise for journals and peer reviewers and all those that are a part of this. How do you think academic journals going as you've gone through this editorial fellowship? How do you think they can strike a better balance between that high rigor and actually nurturing novice authors?
That's a really good question. And I think it's something that Keshri and I, have discussed throughout the year during the fellowship. And some of the ideas that we, kind of both threw out was, what if, you consider this as a service to the academic community, right? Structuring workshops maybe to help novice authors, like a how to submit to JoPTE type thing, right? And start kind of at, the basics, this is what we're looking for, or they could, be phrased as information sessions. I mean, we do that in admissions, right? We'll be like,
Absolutely.
this is how you, make your application competitive, right? So it's kind of the same idea. We also talked about like roundtable sessions at ELC or even CSM, right? Where there is the clinicians might want to do research and publish. And I think that's kind of a good, you do a 1 hour thing, you record it, it's on the website. I mean, we did that for the reviewer workshop. So those are like, it's not a huge lift like a mentoring program or relationship is, but it could be helpful. And it's not, I mean, it's not something that's already out there anyway. I think it's happening at the grassroots level, but it would be really nice to see like a journal kind of taking on, that as well.
Yeah, I those are huge points, and it also helps that transparency
Hmm.
aspect too. I remember the first time writing something, going in and reading, oh, these are the technical things that you have to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But that idea of kind of what is the journal looking for? Where is it
Hmm.
going? We had Keshri come and talk at the Academic Faculty Special Interest Group, I think at
Hmm.
ELC last year, and it
Hmm.
really was helpful to hear from her. This is what the
Yeah.
journal is looking like. This is our acceptance rate. This is why
Yeah.
it's that. I think that's huge and something that you learned in your editorial fellowship as well. So, my last question for you, somebody reading your editorial, if they feel intimidated by the prospects of multiple rejections,
Hmm.
what's the number one piece of advice you'd give them to keep them from just giving up on their
Yeah.
research or giving up on publishing?
It's so easy to give up, right? You get your first like thing back and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible writer. I'm a terrible like researcher. I'm just gonna not do this. But I saw a video a couple of days ago, and the video was not related to publishing at all. It was a parent who was talking about her son's teacher. And she said, I met my son's teacher when I was on a field trip surrounded by all like, I don't know, 80 kids. And if you have kids, you know what 80 kids can feel like.
Absolutely.
And this angel of a teacher, like she shows up, she is like wide smile on her face, and the teacher's like, I love field trip days. And so the mom was like, wow, like I can, this is overwhelming. And this ray of sunshine comes in, just like, I love this. And she said something that really like stuck with me, the parent. She said, we all need sunshine to grow. Right. And that
Yeah.
I felt like that was such a strong thing. And, thinking about this question, I'm like, yeah, we do need sunshine to grow, but we also need a bit of rain,
Yeah.
right? We need a
That's
bit
true.
of, you're either, somehow you need that moisture to grow, right? And so I
Yes.
think sometimes that is the publication process, right? It could be sunshine, you get the thing and you're like minor revisions, yes. But sometimes it's like major revisions. I think that's, a little bit of rain. So I
Yeah.
think it's always like changing that perspective. Yes, it's terrible. I feel like, but also it's knowing it's not personal, right? It's a blinded
Right.
process. Reviewers don't know who I am. I don't know who the reviewers are. So it's not, they don't hate my research because clearly they are probably doing similar research. That's why they're reviewing my paper. It's just we all, I think, want the same things. We just are coming at it from different angles. Probably is kind of what I would say to someone. And that we have junior faculty who are doing their terminal degrees. Work is not the worst thing. The dissertation stage always feels like the hardest because I also think it's a very lonely journey. And sometimes publishing is like that too, right? If you're writing by yourself, it can feel very lonely. And I tell, those junior faculty who are trying to complete their dissertation is the worst thing you can do for yourself right now is to give up. And I would, say the same thing. The worst thing you can do for yourself is to give up because, hey, if JoPTE says no, there are so many other journals that you just need to get your research out and get your voice out or the voices of your participants, right? And I'm a qualitative researcher. And so to me, that's always, my responsibility is to these participants who have a story to tell and that story needs to be told. And sometimes it sounds kind of weird, but that sometimes it's what keeps me going is okay, these students' voices need to be heard. Um, and if I don't do it, who knows when the next opportunity is for someone else to come along to do it. So yeah, yeah.
That point of keep going and hearing voices of the people that you're trying to represent, I think is
Mhm.
huge. Are you sure you're not
Yeah.
a clinician as well? That's a huge point.
Not in this life, that's for sure.
No, I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking with us and giving your perspective, not only
Yeah.
of your background, but also the editorial experiences and the lessons you've learned from it. If someone's thinking about doing the editorial fellowship or applying for it, what do you think? You think they should take a jump for it?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, and this is the same advice I give to anyone who's like, should I go back to school? I'm like, the time is going to pass anyway. What are you going to do with that time, you know? Um,
That's a good point. That's such a good point.
Put it on a t-shirt. If you don't do that, I mean, we all owe it to ourselves to try, right? And I also, I mean, in the process when I was applying to the fellowship, it also was a process of reflection, right? And trying to figure out who I am and why am I doing this? And so there is growth,
Oh yeah,
in every step of the way. So always, there are always good things that will come out of this, whatever the outcome is.
absolutely. Like I
Yeah.
said, thank you so much.
Thank you.